Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, don't forget to fill out your food cards. Cordelia, could you get me down for a Cobb salad and an iced tea? Awesome, thank you. Cordelia's next. I'm really excited because we both drew our slides this time. That is going to be a super, super treat. When do you get two people hand drawing all of their slides, but at Clarity Conf? All right, and I'm not wearing, not wearing my lanyard, but it is okay to take photos of me. This dress is too awesome for a lanyard. All right, so I want to do a little head count because it's early, we're all tired, I'm tired. It's 9:30, which is like 4 a.m. in Portland. There is a time difference. Portlanders live on a completely different time scale. So to wake everyone up, who here works with animation? Like you're working with it today. Okay, who here is like, oh man, I want to work with animation. I wish we could put that in our UI right now. Oh my God, come on, it's fun, people. Get into it, all right. All right, and now, do we have any unicorns in the audience today? I see some unicorns. Any bronies even? Just some bronies? Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, all right. Let's get started. Obey, computer. Computer does not want to obey. Computer wants to freeze. Well, that's actually pretty bad. It's not bad for long. Whoa, okay. Oh, it's just being slow. I thought this might happen. Okay, so I have done all kinds of awesome things, including like collaborating with Mozilla. I always pronounce it the wrong way. Mozilla on this wonderful DevTools Challenger project. It shows people how to use animation tools in the browser, do some fun things with the Web Animations API on MDN, called Alice in Web Animations Land. It's pretty fun. And I also, sometimes, I get to do things that are more serious. And I'm sure you've seen the Lightning Design System enough already at this conference, so I'll just skim over this and say, I helped with the motion portion. I'm everywhere. And that's what brings me here today. Because consistent animation is important. Everyone's throwing around the animation talk. Animation is great, animation is good for UX, animation is great for branding, but we haven't really talked about how we codify it. I have seen people using animation in systems who are very enthusiastic and well-meaning, but then it just all kind of falls apart. Like the same way designers used to use a slightly different color for different mock-ups, and developers would have like 50 shades of the same color of blue. I see that happening all the time with animations today. So this isn't a talk about why you should be using animation. This is a talk about how you should be wrangling animation. Because I used to wrangle geese, I know everything about wrangling things. So yeah, animation is important to consistent branding and UX. For instance, here's a sleek and professional animation versus a fun and funky animation. It's completely different, right? You don't want to just let people go in there and be like, we're putting a fun and funky animation on this button, but everything else about this site should be sleek and professional. Not so cool there. You see, the problem is when you put animation into a system, it's important to keep it consistent throughout your product. It envelopes users in an illusion of life. It's reality. It makes them feel like there are laws in your design system, physical laws that your world obeys. And if part of that system doesn't obey your laws, well, it pops them out of that illusion. It looks sloppy, it looks jarring, it doesn't look right. So how do we wrangle? Here are some of the challenges we end up encountering an awful lot. There's major communication issues because animation sits squarely at the intersection of UX, design, and development. You're going to notice problems if those three groups aren't talking to each other in your system. How many people have problems bridging the communication gap? Yeah, you're going to have problems with animation. Also, inadequate deliverables. Now, there is a tendency for either design or development to own animation on a project. And oh my goodness, when design owns it, sometimes they have problems sending the right deliverables to development. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But it can give animation a horrible rap. Lastly, a lack of respect, especially in larger companies that have widespread teams that don't even like go to lunch together. It can be difficult for one half of the company to say, oh yes, the other half exactly knows what they're talking about. You'll find that the perf people will be like, what? Animations? Those are bad for performance. Performance is the most important thing to our users. And then the designers will be like, what? You're going to sacrifice animations? But animations are the most important part for our users. And nobody's like, yes, you are right. I trust you. I wish more people would say that to me. So, including animations in our style guides and design systems is a great place to start codifying and guiding the use of animation in a healthy UI ecosystem. If only it were so. Unfortunately, this is new territory. It was very hard for me to find examples of universally well-applied animation in design systems that I could bring to this conference and talk to you about. So my talk is actually about why we don't have any universal, awesome documentation for animations. I feel like there's some feedback. I'm going to start soon. There we go. So, most of the times, these initiatives, these documentation initiatives, are driven by either development or design. And you can definitely, in animation, see that there's a clear split between these two houses. Now, whereas designers want themes, they want theory, they want their documentation to be educational and sort of evangelize animation to the branding and marketing and the developers and UXers. You see this a lot in things like IBM's motion guidelines or in material design. There's a lot of, this is why it's important. And it's educational, it's mostly there to guide and help propel future animation on the system. But it doesn't tell people a lot about, well, for instance, how you implement it. It doesn't get into, this is what this thing does there. You'll see this more in projects like the Lightning Design Systems motion design outline. We'll see a little bit more about this, but you'll notice that it gets down into micro components. And it's very instructional, and it's very maintainable. These are your numbers. This is how you put them together. That's a real pity. Designers want underlying principles. They want to know what they're animating and why. In the meantime, developers, they want to know how to build those things out. They're less concerned often with the underlying themes. They just want to make sure that they're doing it right, that the designers aren't knocking on the door being like, this doesn't look exactly like the video I sent you. And I do the funny voices, so don't make fun of me. That's a holdover from doing voiceover work on my own stuff. So, the nice side is that these two things tend to overlap in some places and complement each other very, very well. For instance, documentation. You can document what's there and why it's there. Why does this thing move in from this side? The designers are a perfect place to answer those questions for developers. Developers can provide awesome defaults for people coming in to build new structures in that system. Unity, I mean, once you, of course, write everything down, you provide this beautiful overview of why things are moving the way they are, and thus it justifies its existence. And lastly, guidance, so that future contributors can make decisions to move things in different and new ways, but still in accordance with what's already been there. So there is no ultimate animation style tile or style pattern or style guide or design system, and there shouldn't be. You may need more of one or the other of these things. It depends on your project. It depends on the animation or developer literacy of the company. But I am in a place to empower you to do what works for you and for your team and your projects. And I want to start by telling you what I know about how you can document your animations. And the best place to start is actually at the end, which is when you're getting ready to put your animation into the system, and the developers need deliverables. So we'll get these out of the way first, make everyone happy. Now, some companies have designers who build prototypes in code. And this makes developers so happy. I mean, developers love this because it's easy for them to grab the variables they need to reproduce that animation. It's great. However, there's a problem with this. Unicorns are rare. They also are expensive, or they require a lot of time to train. And motion designers would even argue that code is limiting. Things that are animated, things that are designed code first are kind of like designs that are designed code first. And you'll find some pretty strong opinions that you do need to start with some sketching, or you need to start with some kind of like a look and feel mood board. You know, you gotta do more research than just, this is a fade. We faded the logo in, that's motion design. So keep that in mind. There are some big opinions. On the other hand, developers loathe getting GIFs and movies from design thrown over the wall. I have been this developer right here. I have been very sad on the receiving end. This has happened in multiple occasions. You know, I'm on a project, and there's a visual designer. Visual designer's like, we got this loader, or we've got this picture of a woman who's blinking or something I'm animating, and they send me a GIF, and that's all they send me. They've made it in Flash, they've made it in After Effects, they made it somewhere, and they're like, just reproduce this, and it'll be great, everything will be great, Rachel, just reproduce this. And it takes me 6 hours of, okay, here it is, it's ready. No, it's not ready. That doesn't look at all like the GIF I sent you. It should look more like this. Well, can you give me the duration? I don't know. Can you give me the easing? I don't know. It's like, I've made this thing in a graphic user interface, but I didn't bother to take down any of the numbers to give you. So it's going to take you 6 hours instead of 15 minutes. That is what it feels like. So this happens a lot to me. And if only they had given me a couple of simple things, I would have been in a much better position. For instance, easing. Now, easing describes the rate at which something changes over a period of time. Now, it has its roots back in traditional studio animation, where it was called cushioning, or even slowing. Now, let me visually represent to you what easing is, just in case you aren't animation wonks like I am. So we've got acceleration, which is also known as ease in. We have, don't do this to me, slides, deceleration, also known as ease out. And sometimes even, we're lucky, we get a bounce. And that's easing. It's the rate of change, going from slow to fast, fast to slow, or a rather constant rate of change, or even speeding up and slowing down in such a way as to generate a bounce. Now, this is an opportunity for differentiation, to set our user interfaces and designs apart from others in a very subtle way. For instance, this is a little demo done with Mo.js, all requiring custom easings. Here on my site, you'll notice there's a little bounce when you open and close that sidebar. That's a very custom bounce. You would be hard-pressed to find another site that has exactly that easing on it. And now when you go to the other page, that little slide in, also a custom ease. They do not look like other people's. It's very subtle, and I use them and reuse them as much places as I can. I define them as Sass variables. So what we want are custom easings that reinforce our brand, whether it's professional, fun, elegant, or disturbed even. All right. So this is easings.net. So yeah, if you go to easings.net, you can check out all these different easings that we used to have available to us in the era of Flash. Or you can create your own with tools like the ones in Chrome or Firefox. Let's take a look. Look at that. That's what one of those easings looks like. It's called a cubic Bezier curve. And you can edit them right here inside the browser's dev tools. You can even take these anchors and pull them, and notice how the ball shifts, how it's moving. Notice how the arrow is changing how it moves. So I can pick how I want that arrow to bounce, and I can make it special just for this one site. So yeah, these are the Firefox dev tools. That's linear. It's a constant rate of change. It's very boring. I do not recommend. But Chrome also has their own as well, if you prefer Chrome's. I kind of like Firefox's a little better because, as you can see, when I blow up the font sizes, it's just a little bit more useful. But I'm biased because I've worked with them for a lot. That's cool. All right, you can get by with just a few different curves. But you can't just say, well, we've got one curve and it's going to rule them all. You're going to want a couple. You're going to want an acceleration or an ease out, a deceleration or an ease in, and something subtle for fades and color shifts, like close to linear, but I don't recommend actually linear. And lastly, a bounce. It's optional, but if you need to increase animacy on a button or something, you might want a custom bounce for that. Now, where are you going to use those? That's the special part. Well, decelerate. That actually means something goes from fast to slow. That's great for human interactions because as soon as somebody interacts with something, it quickly reacts to them. However, you might want to use an acceleration or an ease in on system-initiated animations. So they start slowly. They don't frighten people. Holy crap, where did that pop-up come from? Oh my God. You know, you want that to be like slow pop-up. Hi, just the system saying hi to you. Fades and color changes look best with more linear, subtle curves. Just experience, it's personal preference. You may decide otherwise. And lastly, bounces increase animacy. They add a kind of an air of fun, but that's a problem sometimes. It can be a little too distracting or it can be a little too fun, depending on what you're going for. So use bounces with caution. Not a bad idea to have one on hand, just in case, though. So easings are easy to see. It was really fun to show you that, but animation can't happen. Animation can't happen without a duration. So on Lightning Design, I worked with Amy Lee, who's here, and she's awesome, and she is also a musician. And she is a perfect example of what they mean when they say that genius is an overlap between two disparate fields. She had this concept of timing scales, time values that align and combine in many different ways. And you can kind of think of these as like a temporal version of a modular scale in typography. In fact, you can generate a timing scale the same way you could generate a typographical scale. For instance, here I would just swap out px for milliseconds. There are a couple of limitations that you should keep in mind with this, though. For instance, you should want to stay within 70 to 700 milliseconds, because on average, people notice change on a screen either between 70 and 700 milliseconds. It's a pretty wide range, which is why most people in game development use a 200 to 300 millisecond workhorse. It's kind of like your 12 to 14 pixels in typographical terms. 200 to 300 milliseconds. It works for a lot of people. You want to use shorter durations for fades and color changes because they read really quickly. And longer durations for larger movements across the screen when you're sliding something from one point to the other. And lastly, I recommend sticking to milliseconds instead of seconds, partly because using decimals in documentation is a pain in the butt and I don't like it, but also because the Web Animations API takes milliseconds by default, and pretty much any animation library out there takes milliseconds, not all take seconds. So it's just easier in the long run for maintenance, which is what we're concerned with, right? All right. Lastly, our properties. What is being animated? What is changing? We'll get more into these when we talk about storyboards, but for now, all you need to know is that, well, when it comes to CSS, opacity and transform are the most performant properties that you can animate for the web. It doesn't apply to all platforms, and it's certainly not going to apply to the web forever going forward. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, you may run into people who are like, you can't change the color, you can't animate color, that's not the most performant thing you can animate. But if it doesn't really hurt performance or your overall goal, I like to say it's fine to challenge technology from time to time. This quote is one of my favorite quotes, and I use it too much. It's from the Chief Creative Officer of Pixar, John Lasseter. You might have heard of him. Basically, the art challenges the technology, and the technology inspires the art. What this means is, if you don't use it, it ain't going to get faster. So from time to time, it's okay to challenge technology by using things that might not be the most performant in places where they don't hurt anything. I just wanted to give you a permission slip for that. So we combine these three things, easing, timing, and properties, to create vocabularies, to create our own animation language. Oh, what is this? It's Lightning Design System again. Well, the Lightning Design System has a really good example of different vocabularies. We've got different, like, what's this up here? Fade in and fade out. Over here, we've got a color change. I really love how they're all shown, and then you can interact with them. You can grow, fall, rise, shrink, lower, punch, pop, raise. You notice that we've got a bunch of different words for the different animations we're doing here. Now, many of these words start as friendly onomatopoeia used around the office, like pop or plunk. You'll find in conversations you might hear someone say something like, and then it splats onto the page, or maybe zwoosh. It comes in from the side, and you'll notice that people will hold the vowels longer to indicate something has a longer duration. It'll be like zoom, like zoom? No, like zoom. Oh yeah, like zoom. So that's a great place to start, and the best part is it's a group conversation, so everyone feels really invested in it. I love it when people change their sound effects into dialogue. And you can even see these in things like Keynote. I mean, look at this, look at this. We've got swoosh, we've got skid, we got pop, and also this is a screenshot of this page. So this is an example of paving the cow paths and adopting words like these when formulating your animation vocabulary. Now, vocabularies are granular, and you can layer these micro animations to create macro animations. For instance, it fades in, and then it pops to grab users' attention. Then it slides away, and we call this a notification and dismissal pattern. So these words are so useful when we're communicating these visual deliverables with text. You just remember, when everything comes down to this, use your words. Words are the lowest common denominator for information. They're capable of being read out loud, indexed by search engines, searched and found within your text editor, translated by machines. But before someone says a picture is worth 1,000 words, hear me out. We have ways of using words and visuals. For instance, storyboards. Storyboards are used in cinema, game design, and interaction development. Why not web development too? They were started originally by Disney Studios, invented them for working on large overarching animation projects like Snow White. And they're so darn useful that Hollywood and all those other industries adopted them. It lets separate teams coordinate and it reduces dead ends. Directors get an overview. And in the meantime, it lets everyone sync up together. So what do these look like for us? Well, if you're working on an internal project or it's just you doing the design, they can get really sloppy. But there's still a good way to think about how things change over time. For sharing some ideas or guiding a small team, this one I threw together for working on that DevTools Challenger project. Look, I've even got Post-its to show, and you rip it off, and this is what it looks like when you do that. But this is a much more professional storyboard. Notice how clean it is, and the lack of Post-its, and the numbering system. This is something that I might send to a client doing a motion design audit. Video is really hard to print out to hand to people at meetings or even to send to them in emails. So if you want to have a long-term documentation, sometimes storyboards are more useful than a video. But it's good often to have a video that accompanies them. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I'm going to explain for a moment how these storyboards work. You'll notice I'm using two colors. I'm using blue and I'm using orange. That's because those two colors tend to be most visible to most humans everywhere. I don't want to use red or green. That would be really mean to some folks. So using the blue to indicate when something is being interacted with. And notice I describe underneath when hovering or focusing, that's in blue to indicate what the interaction is. And then in the next one, I'm using orange to describe that the arrow is morphing to an X. And I've also colored the arrow orange. This is a really good example of how you can sync up both color, words, and visuals together to indicate what's changing over what amount of time. Here's a close-up for that. This is also, these little words down here, also a really good place to justify what's happening. The item will slide down from the top of the list because a new thing is being added to help orient the user, to help the user see that something has changed. This is a great place to make those justifications. Use your words. All right, so storyboard tools. I still haven't found the perfect storyboarding app. I would totally like to make one. I think someone might have beat me to it. So for now, I just say go old school, use Post-its, index cards, whatever. I have a precious storyboard template, which you can find at that download link. Just go for it, customize it, make it your own. And that company I told you that's probably beating me to it is Boards, that's with an O, not an A.com. It hasn't come out yet, but I've looked at it and it's pretty hot. So storyboards are great for communicating with words, but they can't show you how an interaction is going to feel in real life. And, guess what the client asked after I delivered one of these precious, perfect storyboards for an audit? They said, oh, this is great. Can we see a video of that? So you do need to show videos from time to time. It is very important when you're working with animation. But that's what we have Animatics for. An animation is worth 1,000 meetings if a picture is worth 1,000 words. So an animatic is a term from animation. This is an animatic for Space Unicorn. I'm using it with permission of my animator friend, Brienne. And as you can see, it's just some sketches put together with the music. And of course, as we've gotten better tools for animators, the animatics have actually gotten much more complex and much more like a finished animation over time. It's a great song, you should listen to it. So this is what we can do by making small videos or GIFs on our own. This is something I made on a lunch break using a stop-motion app and some Post-its. I was having fun. Wireframes and storyboards are great together. You can even use Post-its. But keep in mind that animatics are not deliverables. Do not throw a video over the fence to developers without deliverables. Polished animatics are like mood boards, and rough ones are more like doodles. They're guidelines, but they're not, like written in stone, and they don't provide people with much actionable content. They're just more like, yeah, that looks good. A test run. So animatic tools, what do we got? We got Keynote. We got Adobe After Effects. Seeing a lot of job titles for prototypers that include Adobe After Effects. Principal app, that's pretty awesome, but it's very native based, and stop motion app was what I used to make the little loading post-it. So studio animation animatics can be screen tested on an audience, like your boss or your coworker. But web is interactive, and audience testing requires an interaction component. Can't test storyboards or videos. You need prototypes. And what developer doesn't want a good copy-paste, to quote Stephanie Ruiz from yesterday? Developers love prototypes because it's trivial to inspect an element and dig out those deliverables. Unfortunately, prototypes, unlike storyboards, are terrible for documentation. You cannot hand a prototype to an external agency that's coming to help you with a small site or something and expect them to match your design language from a prototype. It just doesn't work that way. So let's talk a little bit about what prototype options we've got here. For people who are native-oriented, there's Principal and Pixate. Principal is probably the winner of these two. For more web-oriented prototyping, you can use InVision. It has some really primitive animation ability, and I know a lot of people hack it using GIFs. UXPin has slightly less primitive animation abilities, but still web-oriented prototyping tools tend to be failing on the animation front, which is really, really disappointing. But if you have unicorns, code-oriented, you can use Foundation or Framer.js. So alone, none of these are sufficient for communicating animation clearly across silos or with longevity. However, if we combine them, storyboards being verbal and animatics being visual, animatics and prototypes being visual, we can combine those two to provide really solid documentation that gets both the look and feel and how you need to reproduce it. All right, we're in the full ending now. Generating buy-in. Many animation docs are created hoping if you write it, they will follow. But the truth is, it is rare for anyone to care as much about animation as you do. I know. Oh my God. How many people have actually built something and you're like, I hope everyone's going to adopt this, and you drop it and it's like you've dropped a dead animal onto the stage and nobody looks at it? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, okay, so the trick here is this is all social skills, and those are things I learned late in life, so I'm learning. I'm going to share with you what I've learned. Having people contribute even just a few words to your documentation, being like, you know what you said at that meeting about how we should use a fade? I would love it if you would write that in our documentation. Can make them feel like, wow, this is my baby too. I want to be more involved. Or not, it's kind of manipulative, but it does work. Another thing I like to do is this cool exercise. I use it all the time when I'm training people. It's a great team builder. What you do is you take, everyone has wireframes of what a page should look like before and after. You know, got point A, it's got a closed drop-down menu, and point B, it's got an open drop-down menu. And then say, hey everybody, let's get some index cards and let's try to draw some examples of what that between state might look like. Come on, is it swinging down from on high? Is it coming in from the side? And this is a lot of fun because it gets people thinking, you know, this could be actually the more entertaining part of my job. Most of all, a team needs animation champions, not just for maintainability, but also because somebody has to grow that caring inside the team. Someone has to grow the love for animation. Make it a consideration on par with color and fonts, so that nobody's going to come in and be like, you know, I think we should just use Garamond. Nobody's going to come in and be like, you know, we need to use bounces. You need to have someone who is there championing and being like, well, actually, you do need a well, actually for animation. But it has to be a friendly well, actually. To that end, you don't want to be a single point of failure. You don't want to make yourself a gatekeeper. You want co-conspirators. You want to recruit someone preferably from another silo. If you're in marketing, you want someone in UX. If you're in design, you want someone in development. Find someone from the opposing team and get them as excited as you are. Just sniff around. I'm sure there's someone out there who's going to geek out about this as much as you are. Animation is fun. It is cool. It doesn't have to be a chore, and it doesn't have to be, oh my God, do we have to add one more deliverable to this thing? It could be cool. This could be a brilliant alliance. And lastly, this is the most effective piece of advice I can pass on to you. Do it anyways. Sarah Jasner, she works for Trulia. They're going to have some really awesome animation documentation coming out very soon, I hope. Keep an eye out for it when it comes out. It should be pretty kick-ass. But I got this advice from her, and it sticks. In the end, you have to do it anyway. You have to show people what can be. You do have to recruit people to be on your team and follow through and continue the valiant strife. But in the meantime, first you have to start. So a template library is totally going to need different documentations and an interactive microsite. There is no right way right now. I couldn't find one. I looked all over. I interviewed all kinds of people. I could not find one. But you can cultivate an animation-friendly collaborative culture. You can use storyboards, animatics, and prototypes to not only ideate, but also to document. Or ideate. I don't know how you pronounce that. I see it written all the time. I don't think it's really a word. Speaking of words, use your words. Define your own language for different kinds of animations. Own it. Nobody else gets to name these things, you do. Yeah! And remember to give developers the deliverables they need to perfectly recreate those animations every time. Easing, duration, and properties. There is no right way. You have to find your own way. Thank you very much. And if you would like to talk more about animations, there is a Slack channel that I founded, slackanimationatwork.com. And there's a cool newsletter, webanimationweekly.com, that I write every week. You're welcome to come in, and I'd love to know what you think.
At the beginning, you mentioned briefly the concept of like having rules for your animation that it follows. Like you're setting up some like laws of physics that like this website should have and it should follow, and it's like weird and bad maybe to break your own rules once you've set them up. Is that what you were getting at there?
Yeah, like, okay, babies, they understand, like, when something goes behind another object, it doesn't disappear. They understand that when you drop something, it hits the ground. It's something that we're all born knowing. So we have this innate anticipation from the moment we're born that the universe behaves in certain ways. And it works the same way on websites, too. Once you set up a pattern of behavior, if you break that pattern, it can be very noticeable. The human system picks right up on it. You get a little bit of leeway because this is a screen, so when you come on, things are bouncing or floating, you know, they might give you a little bit of credit for that, but if then suddenly things are not obeying those laws, it's noticeable.
What do you think the repercussions of that is? It just you just kind of like a smirk, kind of like, yeah, that website isn't doing it right.
It sends a subconscious message of, oh, this isn't finished.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't really trust this site. This app can't really have been made in America. It's probably from like some company that's trying to steal my money, kinds of negative connotations.
Like nothing good comes from breaking your own rules.
No, it's like wearing a really cheap suit to a wedding.
Okay, good. We like
no one's taking you seriously, and you should go home.
Good. So not only setting up rules of like physics and what happens, but I think you also mentioned like on this website, things slide in like from the left or or there should be some kind of reason for that. So an example would be like some menu that slides in from the left. You wouldn't all of a sudden just arbitrarily slide it in from the right on another page because it would be like, why did they do that, right? Or it's not following their own rules.
You know, you will find, especially when you work with more than one person who cares about animation on a team, that people will be like, I think it should slide in from the right. And then you say, why? And that person should be able to come back at you and be like, because of progression. Everything's been sliding off to the left because we've been dismissing it. This is new information. It should come in from the right because people read from left to right. Oh, look, they justified why it should be that way. And that might be a good thing to incorporate. Or it might be unjustifiable. If the person comes to you and is like, well, just because it looks good, then maybe that's not worth prioritizing and you should just stick to your guns.
Okay, use your words.
Yeah, because it looks good is never a justification for animating anything. Put your time into something else.
Just because it looks good, not enough.
No, and there are times when something looks really good, like we should have this illustration draw in because it looks good. Well, if the illustration is the only thing on that page, that might be a justification, but you should follow up because it looks good and it's the only thing on the page.
I can see people falling trapped to that, right? You mean there's like a cool SVG one that's a little overused,
yeah.
that's just like it's drawing itself.
Yeah, and Polygon was
that.
the first
I like
company
that.
that did that. I loved it too, but you have to realize that first article where that SVG drawing technique got done, it was for a review of a console, and every game site was posting console reviews, and they were all just showing like, here's the console in slightly different lighting, here's the console on a white backdrop, and they're like, we got to do something with this console that doesn't look like everyone else
So their
did
reasoning was differentiation.
Right.
And now it's not working so well because if every review has that, it's not differentiation anymore.
It's still a classic. They were there first.
It's a classic. Good. He's probably the person who did it.
I hope so. I'd like to talk to them.
So maybe there's some parallels here between your talk and Anna's talk in that isn't there some moments at which some animations are classy and acceptable and some that aren't. So like even if you rock some fun in your animations, even if you want to use some bounce action because you've decided it's appropriate or whatever, maybe not on the submit button for your contact form for when you're having troubles with the app kind of thing. Like I wouldn't want to like click submit on a form where I'm complaining and have it be like super spin move rainbow, you know.
Unless you're a baby, but even then, it should be mentioned that babies have trouble processing those kinds of animations too.
Yeah. Baby-friendly animations, is that a thing?
That should be a thing. Thank you.
It's April 1st.
You've just helped me come up with a new product offering.
Good.
But yeah, you're
let's name
right.
it.
Tone in animation is
Tone,
another
that's
thing.
it.
Yeah. Another thing to keep in mind is like, what kind of tone are you conveying with your animations? Are you going for the sleek and professional? Are you going with fun and exciting? And when
that
do
can
you
vary
break
page
tone?
to page, right?
Right.
Okay. What's another example of tone? And would you say like could you, I don't know, classy or business casual?
You are asking me to describe a visual thing on a stage without a video.
Mouth blog it.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Whoosh.
I would need like a drawing board behind me and really big markers.
So you even mentioned a little bit, but I wrote this down even before you said it. In that like the tooling behind animations is kind of in kind of a weird state on the web. Sure, there's some tools where you can drag around some Bezier curves or whatever, but it seems like nobody's really struck gold on the like this is the tool for helping you with web animations. Why do you think that is?
Well, we did have some gold back in the day. Flash had a really good animation interface. Unfortunately, it was the wrong format for the open web. But it was a really good interface that a lot of people could grasp early and use often. The question is, will we be editing web animations with a Flash-like interface, or will we come up with something completely different?
Have you seen it tried? I feel like that's, cause I remember with Flash,
I've
there's
seen
little
some
keyframes and
attempts.
dots and stuff in there. And
Personally, I never liked the interface. That's me. The timeline is nice, but I think what we're facing right now is that browsers throughout history have only had to animate one thing, and that's scrolling. Everything else was the Flash plugin, and now we're animating more and more things. It started with some hover effects, and now it's coming out to be full-on UI, and browsers just, like, we've never worked inside that paradigm. Even the developers' tools are mostly, let's face it, they're text and they're consoles. And that's great if you're trying to look at JavaScript objects. It's not great if you're trying to analyze a visual element. And we're having problems with both prototyping and with the dev tools, but we're working through it as a family, like we always do, because that's the open web.
So is there a bright future for it? Do you think the tooling for animation can be cracked?
I think so. I mean, we've got so many people excited about it. You get
Yeah.
enough minds working on something, and you'll come up with an even better solution. So I'm excited to see what happens when the community gets to work on these tools and isn't dictated to by a company outright. I mean, we've got the Web Animations API, which basically opens up the CSS animations and transitions rendering engine for inspection and manipulation in the browser. It's open season on building your own animation tooling right now.
Open season on open source.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you.